in jihadi organisation.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for free.
My name is Carlton King, and welcome to this special part 2 of the Black Spy podcast, the show which shines a light on the world of secret intelligence, national security, and armed personal protection operations, and of course the geopolitical world in which that world is set. This part 2 is part 2 to Samantha's story. Story sounds a bad word. Samantha's life, actually, her fight for life, a fight to prevent her from dying, and a situation in which it would seem that the doctors in the UK didn't have the capacity to save her life. You must listen to part 1 if you haven't already done it. It was last week's episode, so go back if you haven't done it. If you have, this is part 2. It's an amazing story, and I just want to ask Sam to continue where she left off so we can understand how difficult it was for this young woman to attempt to save her life. Hi, Sam. Welcome back.
Hi. Thanks for having me.
So we were at the point where there were basically just 2 surgeons in the world who said they could in some way ameliorate or save your life from this condition which you'd found out about, which seemingly very few people in the UK knew of. And you then had to try, because in the States, nobody does anything for nothing. So you had to try and somehow raise, well, can you tell the viewers, an incredible amount of money to keep you alive.
Yeah. Just to make it clear, the genetic condition that I was diagnosed with was not the thing that was killing me. There are a lot of people who have that condition and don't know it, including like my older sibling and my mum, as we later found out. Right. It was the fact that I'd had this injury, which had caused the injury to the predisposed weakness from the genetic condition that I already had. So when a person with Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, which is the condition, has some sort of incident which results in them needing a neurosurgery, there is nobody in the UK who is, or there was at that time, nobody in the UK who was able, who had the, like you said, the capacity to save my life. And at that stage, I learned that I was told that my brainstem was crushed. It was 95%. It's called brainstem disability index. So it was far advanced damaged. My spine was collapsing. I guess the best analogy I can give is if you imagine like a Jenga game. Each vertebrae was giving way and shifting and moving, and I could physically feel it moving. I mean, I had to manipulate it in place. And that I was told was going to cause paralysis and organ failure, which is things that I was beginning to experience intermittently, but still very, very scary. And then next it would be death, either via the organ failure or via internal decapitation, because my head was not stable on the top of my neck any longer.
So that's where the headline came from, body being decapitated. What was it, in the Sun, or was it in one of the newspapers that you got?
A lot of them. I mean, because a lot of the time they kind of like grab the story and, move with it themselves. But yeah, the internal decapitation, I think it might have been the Sun, and a couple of, American, I think Washington Post did that one as well.
Right. So. I mean, that was negative, but it helped you, didn't it, as well? Which is why I bring that up, because that helped you be able to raise money.
Yeah, I guess I had to look at it two ways. I mean, at this stage, I am, I think I just turned 30. A single mum, lost my job, everything else. All this was happening to me. And there was a part of me that was relieved that I had an answer at last, because I remember the night before my 30th birthday crying and thinking, I'm dying and nobody is telling me nobody seems to know. And I know I'm dying. And then I got this answer and I'm told you've got 8 to 10 weeks to live. If you do not have this surgery, which is 95% success rate in America, then you're not going to survive. And the longer you leave it, the worse it's going to get. And we can only halt the progress this condition has made. We can't, necessarily fix the damage that's been caused. So I was going to end up stuck as I was for the rest of my life.
So who was telling you this, though, that you only had that amount of time to live? I
went to multiple specialists, and I had it, rechecked over with various professors that worked in that area. So at the time, there was a specialist in Barcelona. It was reaffirmed by multiple professors in America and in England. So there were about 6 doctors. The only people that it was initially confirmed on the NHS.
Oh, okay.
I was told to go away and think about the surgery because it was going to be horrific. And I was told a lot of people, the wording was something like, you should hope that you die on the operating table, because if you don't, the life that follows you is going to be far more horrific. So I was told to go away and think about it, after which...
in other words, what they're saying is think whether you'd rather just die normally or whether you'd have the operation and die subsequently.
Yeah, but I promised my children I'd fight. I
of course.
Be a choice. I didn't have a choice. And obviously I wanted to live, so yeah. And I was kind of in denial, and my family was certainly in denial, like, these doctors might be wrong, let's just wait and see. And I'm feeling the ticking of time and the pressure of everything. And I broke down actually in a school playground, dropping my children off one morning, couldn't walk. It was very clear I was struggling. And sat for a coffee with this mum, and my body was just giving up. It was just very, very hard. And I explained the situation, and by the next day, or within 2 days at least, one of the husbands was doing a fundraiser for me. And that
Brilliant.
was then the beginning of my fundraising being born, threw himself off a bridge, bungee jumping, and yeah, that fundraise, that campaign very, very quickly gained traction. I was very, very lucky with that.
Well, you say that, Sam, because, and it's quite interesting, because I went to a fella who, I won't mention any names, who does fundraising. And the fella basically said to me, it's not immediate enough.
Yeah.
We can see this, but, and to be fair, you didn't look ill enough in the fella's opinion. So this is why I mentioned in part 1 about how you looked, because this fella said that, who is actually quite a well-known fundraiser within celebrity circles and so on and so forth. So it actually isn't as easy as you think. I mean, the fact that the bungee jumper guy got something started is fantastic, because the people who are set to do this type of work, and often doing it with children or whatever else, so it's an easier model as they perceive it, didn't, one of the main guys here wasn't interested in putting it forward. So that suggests to me that there's kind of it's kind of like a game.
It's all a game, yeah.
Right, okay.
And that's, it sounds sick. I think, there's so many perspectives to look at it from, and I do really count myself, and I want to say lucky, and I am lucky. However, just to fast forward, the life I'm living is not the life I fought for. This is not what I was fighting to live. But we adapt, or try to. Now, there was a very, fundraising is so hard, and I'd never done it before. I'd never done anything of the sort. And we were lucky that we made, I remember me and my friends jumped on board, and they were fairly new friends to me. They jumped on board, and we watched this amount ticking up. you know, and the local area jumped together quite well.
Yeah, it's brilliant.
But with regards to hitting large amounts, I mean, that was majority due to fundraising, due to media interviews that I would do. And then, you know, we would obviously reach a wider audience.
And you did sort of Granada, can you just give the listeners an idea of what you did?
Granada and BBC regional news followed me throughout the whole journey, and, you know, they're still checking now. With, like, you know, Live 5 radio, a lot of the different BBC radios, Magic, Smooth, Heart Radio, and then it eventually got picked up by more international news. So, you know, it went into, like I said, the Washington Post, New York Post, Poland, Germany. Just it did hit worldwide, and that helped. But it is, like you said, you know, there were various things that played to my advantage. And I did have to look at it from almost trying to remove my emotions from the situation. And we've got weeks here. I've got the knowledge of people's behaviour from my studies as a psychologist. I have an understanding of what motivates people, you know, and I'm a single mum of 2 children. And I mean, that works in my advantage. I'm not going to lie. It definitely did. But it wasn't until the end where people started to realize, okay, she's now got a chance of raising this insane amount of money, because the first time round, I believe we had to raise something like £250,000 in 6 weeks.
Yeah,
we did it. Got to America, turned out I needed more surgeries, and all in all, over a matter of weeks, we raised $500,000. But each time it was in relation to what you just said, towards the end, where I guess what you would call big players would come in and say, look, I don't want to be named, I don't want this discussing, but we can see now that you're going to achieve it. We can see now how serious this is, and we're going to now help you reach your target. So yeah, it was,
and that's great, isn't it? But this whole sort of assistance process. I mean, look, you can see it on the widest scale if you look at the Ukraine now. I mean, if you look at the amount of people dying in the Ukraine, as opposed to the amount of people dying in Yemen, or who died in the Congo, there is no connection. I mean, there's 5 million people died in the Congo. There's what? I don't know what the figures are, but now they're saying there's maybe 20, 30,000, something, maybe more now. Don't get me wrong, everybody's dead. But the point is,
it's all about trending. Yeah,
absolutely. When you look at the difference between 5 million dying and, you know, in a war, and 30,000 dying in a war, yet still the whole world's looking at one set of people, but not looking at the other. So it's whether you can get this bite into this cherry, and in one way you bit into it locally. But as this guy had said to me, nationally, and I also asked the woman who knew this guy to kind of work on him as well, and there was no joy. Nationally at the time, you weren't, you just weren't on the picture. To put it that way, let's be truthful about it. You just weren't there. Now, absolutely. Maybe once you got the traction from TV, maybe I should have gone back to the fella and said, she's now got TV traction. Does this aid you? You know, it's a strange thing. They say they're not getting anything out of it, these people who do it, but there clearly is something in it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, generally, we only give as humans. You know, we might not consciously do it, but we only do something because we are motivated to do it by usually fear or reward. So, often we might give, and we might not necessarily be giving to receive, but we do receive that feeling of pride in ourselves, or I played a part in that. And that is why I think a lot of the time people step forward when the traction has already started moving, and that's upon the person, I guess, who's dying or suffering and their close people, to get that traction. And then they can step in and go, I was the one who changed that. And that's not, I don't mean that in that they're necessarily aware of doing that. But I also then think there's the other side of, you know, how do people know who's genuine and who isn't? I was accused many times of not being genuine.
This is why I
a
said
very
to you
difficult
earlier,
balance. Yeah. Very difficult balance.
Yeah. And again, you're right. I mean, in that way, you weren't feeding in. You didn't look sick enough to they wanted you to present yourself as ravaged.
Yeah, I had to show myself in my most vulnerable, horrific circumstances. Yeah. And I got
that's
paid
not,
every
and that's
time I
not
did
right,
that.
is it? Because if you've only got X amount of time to live as you thought you had, why do you want to show yourself as ravaged when you want to make the best of yourself for the period of time you've got? I mean, it's a crazy situation.
The emotional side. Yeah, the emotional side, that tug of war in your mind of, gosh, I'm dying. I mean, I was planning my funeral with my 6 and 7 year old. I'm trying to explain to them what's going to happen to me. I'm trying to plan for every circumstance. You know, if I'm paralyzed, brain damaged, take the pressure off my parents, make these decisions legally. Who's going to care for my children? You know, handing over reins, writing letters, all of the emotional side, whilst trying to make the most of my time where I physically, what I physically had, which was not a lot because I would exhaust so much, you know. And that energy, purely every last bit of energy, unfortunately, had to go into the fight, the fundraise, night and day, and not towards where anybody else who would be dying and fighting to live as long as they would direct, by choice, direct their energy.
So we've got that. So we've got to the point where you've got some traction. Like it or not, that's the wording we're using because that's the way it's being played in this modern world. So you've got that, and you're international now. You've got that. People have jumped on the bandwagon for whatever reason. And that's great because they potentially can save your life. But now you had the disaster of the US. Can you explain that?
Which one?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
Oh gosh. I mean,
the first one, you had the operation. The fellow's a specialist. You put your life in his hands, literally. He's done it, and then you find yourself a day after in a hotel room. Just explain that to people.
Well, see, as somebody who's never had healthcare outside of England, and in England had just started to experience a little bit of the private healthcare because I'd needed to, I kind of naively or otherwise assumed when you go into America and you're paying hundreds of thousands of pounds for such an incredible surgery, it's like mammoth surgery, that you would be experiencing some sort of quality. And I got there and actually was given a matter of days I had to book and plan my own anaesthetist. I had to book my own hospital bed, my ICU bed, my surgeon, the treatments for afterwards.
And you're paying $750,000, basically.
Yeah, at the time we had 250-ish K.
So $500,000, basically, around, give or take.
Yeah. And it was it was supposed to be one surgery. So I go for this surgery and I'm in this. I remember just spending the days right up to my surgery locked away in my room. And if I'm not asleep and unconscious and paralyzed, I am surrounded by paper trying to figure out, I don't know.
This is what I don't understand. So what are you paying the $500,000 for if they aren't even sorting out an anaesthetist for you? You would think the whole team would be there. So they don't have their own team. Down.
In my situation, no, I was told, well, why have you not booked the anaesthetist? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I just don't have a clue. I'm in a hotel here with my parents and my children and my little sister who's younger than my children. And we're all in a hotel room and I'm being told, why have you not booked this? Why have you not booked that? And I'm thinking, I don't know what to do here. And there was, it felt like a lack of patience with my ignorance.
Yeah.
And I weren't well enough to be doing it. So that alone was crazy pressure because I had planned, I get there, I see the surgeon, this God, he's going to save my life, he's amazing, and his team are going to look after me, and I'm going to use the days before to make memories with my babies, however I can.
You basically think you're like in the UK and everything's sorted out. That's what you're basically thinking. and
We
you've
take
got
for
your family
granted,
there in
yeah.
case it goes wrong. Well, let's be absolutely truthful. You've got all
Yeah.
your family there in case the last time they see you is when you go under the knife, because that was a good likelihood, wasn't it?
It was a very good likelihood, yeah.
So
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
so people can understand that's why all the family's there, because they're basically saying goodbye to you. Nobody's saying that, but that's what it is.
Well, we did say that in the end, yeah. But my parents, I needed my parents there to care for me.
Yeah.
My children, like I said, I'm a single parent. My children came with me, and they did have an option to stay with the dad who they were seeing at the time. But they wanted to be there to see me for one last time. They wanted to know what was happening. They needed a level of control.
Yeah.
And I respected that. And then obviously my parents have a daughter who's quite young, so she came too. So I mean, they're all out of work. It affected everybody. Sure. They couldn't work for months, what turned into 5 months out there. Go down for the surgery. Again, that just everything was just not as you expect. You know, I'm in a waiting room. My name's called. I expect, as I guess you do in England, you know, your family come in and they'll see you and you say your goodbyes. And I say the things I want to say, and then that's that. But I was called, and then I was expected not to see them again. And I'm going in for a 12-hour surgery. And so I did luckily get to have 5 minutes with them. Wake up from the surgery, and my first words were, "It's not worked." And I'm alive. I'm not paralyzed, but my neck is dislocated still. I mean, you know, if you've been dislocated, you know one when you feel it. And I was having many, many, many at the time.
So they were just dislocating all of a sudden, weren't they? Like you dislocate your arm, all of a sudden your neck was just dislocating. Like,
yeah, I mean, I'd never had a dislocation prior to the injury that we discussed in part 1, and then it was like there was this unstable. You've got your spine unstable, and then there's this knock-on effect to everything else. And so, yeah, I would literally physically with my fingers pop my vertebrae back in. And that was happening after surgery, and the surgery itself was to remove all movement of my neck. Sure. So because my neck was too unstable, they had to reinforce it almost like scaffolding, and they would take the bone marrow from my hip and mix it with a donor tissue, which would create a paste, and then they would put false ligaments in because mine had been too damaged to stabilize my neck. So they would turn, basically, in essence, they would turn the whole of my vertebrae in my neck to bone, so there was no movement. And then they would also scaffold it with titanium rods.
So you knew you could only see forward in the end. That's basically.
I would not be able to look up, down, left, right. Yeah, but I could. I could when I woke up.
Right.
And
so that's why you knew.
And the pain. I mean, I was physically still having to pop these vertebrae back up at the top, and I'm like, this shouldn't be possible. There's hardware there. This should not be possible, but it was happening.
And let's just be clear, you weren't getting any aftercare, were you?
So what you do is you pay for everything's. You've got a QR code on your wrist, basically, and every time a doctor or nurse comes in, that's scanned and it's adding up to a bill. I wasn't consciously aware of that for some time. Down to things. I mean, I wasn't a smoker, and I was being given nicotine patches, and it was being tagged onto my care. It was very strange looking back now with hindsight, not this blur of the drugs. So the surgery is supposed to be so intense that because of the pain, they put you in an induced coma afterwards. And they fast learned that I'm what they call a super rapid metabolizer. So no matter how many drugs they gave me, it was not making me unconscious. And the pain relief, they would give me ketamine, morphine, LSD, THC. I was on Oxy, everything. And they were giving it me in very strong doses, and nothing was happening. By the time they'd leave the room, it was out of my system. I'd have 5 minutes relief. Apparently that's a common thing with people with my genetic condition, but I wasn't prepared for that. And then, as you say, my veins started collapsing, so it became difficult for them to be giving me these drugs IV. They tried to move me to oral medication, and I couldn't absorb it. It just wasn't working properly for me. And the room was costing us, the first night was 40,000 a night. And then following that, I think it was 10,000 a night, if I remember right. So we're aware of this, and we're aware there's something still not right. And yeah, I mean, I was moved out of the hospital into our hotel, like 27th floor of the hotel, within days.
How do they do that, Sam? They just put you in an ambulance, drive you across, throw you in your room and leave you?
No, my dad had hired a car. I wish that.
Hell, what the?
Somebody came to us and said, there's your medications. My parents were overwhelmed with, I mean, I'm not joking, I've still got it, we have a whopping roll of paper that had every hour, on the hour, 24 hours a day.
So no nurse provided, nothing?
No, nothing. It's there's all your prescriptions. Find a pharmacy that will give it to you, because that was another issue. I ended up going into withdrawals from immense drugs because they just discharged us very fast. And on our way to the hotel, the pain in the car was crazy. And my dad tried to stop at a pharmacy thinking, like in England, you drop in a prescription, you pick it up. Yeah. But we weren't US citizens. Absolutely. They wouldn't give us these drugs. These drugs were very controlled drugs. And including, like, in the end, what we ended up being given was multiple injections, and I can't remember what it's called, something that they put under your nose for you to inhale if you've had an overdose. So we had a stock of overdose medication in case my parents put me into, which did actually happen, an overdose coma in the hotel. And that was all that we had, and a doctor's mobile number. So that was...
Right. So what I'm getting from this is that, because when I lived in Germany, I knew that they used to send some German, from the German healthcare system, they used to send some people that they couldn't operate on because it was let's say it's an operation, like your doctor, there's only 2 in the world and they sat in the United States. They'd send them over to the US to get treatment on the German health system. Okay, it's a superb system. But they had all this assistance. They had nurses, doctors all the time, blah, 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 blah. So I'm assuming the reason they got that was because they basically did an insurance deal with American insurance, because obviously it was happening all the time to the Germans. And that was all. But you're outside of that process. You're just a patient who they're seeing as everything that you're doing is separate. So nothing's being put together. So I'm understanding now. So what's, because you haven't got an overarching body, you are just a person just picking up each separate thing as it comes along. When you talk about that QR thing, I can imagine it. That's it. So they're just treating you as a
cash-rich donkey.
Absolutely. I didn't put it that way, but it's true. Absolutely.
That is what I was. There's a lot of factors into it, but an insurance company gets a bill, it's nowhere near a cash payer. Yeah. They double it for us. I mean, like in America, my experience was, and I was advised by contacts that I had in America, haggle with the prices. I mean, I weren't well enough to do this. Yeah. My parents were on breaking point. You know, my dad had a stroke whilst I was over there about to go in for my surgery. My mum then had 3 children to look after. It was just insane, the circumstances. And it was haggle, because they will whack the price up because you don't have an insurance body. So it was, there were so many factors involved in all of it that just couldn't have been foreseen for us.
So how long did you spend over there just explain to the total how long you spent in total, and how many operations you then had to have, and how the money nearly ran out. Can you just explain that, how that went?
So I was discharged from the hospital. That then led us to the prescription fight, and me being in a hotel bed, my parents trying to figure out how on earth to care for me and manage this and keep me alive. I'm convinced I am not surviving. I'm still dying. I'm not stabilized, and we're using all our money up. What are we doing? Prescriptions were running into $8,000 to $10,000 a month. So we were probably on about week 5, 6 at this time, I'd imagine. I'd had 1 surgery. I then pushed and finally got a scan to prove that what I was concerned about was happening. and I needed another surgery. And gosh, I mean, I don't want to
Sorry,
get
Sam,
numbers wrong.
had the doctor been back to see you, or was that him
No,
done?
He would email and text. If my parents had a problem, he would. It's crazy to say. If we had a problem, we would text him, and he was fast at responding.
Mm.
And I don't know how he did that with all of his surgeries and other patients, but he did that. And we kind of made contacts on our way. So like I got to know a porter in the hospital, I got to know a nurse in the hospital, and they felt for us and they gave me the number. And so we kind of like gathering this collection of contacts that we would be like, what do we do here, or what's happening here, and get their advice.
Mm.
But no, he didn't. He never came out to see us. There was a follow-up, and I wasn't well enough to attend it. And I was like, at this point, I'd written an email begging, please don't send me home in this state. Like, the world is watching. They have donated, and I can't go back home and die. Like, please don't do this. And I was sent for a scan, and I researched. I mean, I'm one of those people who, if something's going to happen, I have to watch what surgery they're going to do on YouTube first. I have to know everything. And I felt that there was this element of me needing control to keep myself alive as well at that stage. So I pushed for a scan just to kind of like confirm or deny whether or not my fears were true. And I got there, and it was the wrong scan that I'd been sent for. And I said to the radiographer, like, my skull's unstable. Can you see this image here? And he said, yeah, it's hanging on by 5 to 10%. But you've had surgery, right? And I said, no, not there. Not in that area. I haven't. I've had surgery here and below. And
so if you have not known what you had, they wouldn't have known, and you wouldn't be able to say.
Absolutely, yeah. He then changed the prescription and did the right scan. Found out I needed surgery very, very fast to fix things. And money for the surgery.
So how did you raise that? How did you raise hundreds of thousands of pounds?
That time's very much a blur. So during this time, I'm comatose because my parents accidentally overdosed me on the medication that I was given. So I was unconscious for a number of days. I was also losing touch with reality. I was being contacted night and day by various media sources. And so I do have memories and, like looking through things, recollection of doing interviews from my bed in the hotel, and doing updates on Facebook, on social media, and people would thankfully share it. And that brought the money in. I mean, there were a group of friends back home, five friends who pushed things in the local area, and also managed some of the online stuff that I couldn't do. I honestly don't know. We were just so lucky. I really don't know in that instance. Unfortunately, I did have another surgery to stabilise me, but everything was a battle to be heard, or felt like a battle to be heard. And days before we were leaving the US, after being there for 5 months at that stage, we needed to get back. My parents needed to get into work. My brother did as well. My dad were very poorly. Needed to get the kids into school. There were so many factors. We flew back home, and I learned days before we flew back home that my whole spine at this point had destabilized because of the weight of the titanium, because I'd been bedridden for so long that my muscles that were holding my already weak spine together were wasting away. And I would likely need stabilizing, as in loss of movement from my skull now down to my pelvis. So I would never move again. And I retreated. From
you retreated mentally from it, and you went and physically.
Yeah, mentally was right. Okay, I've got a bucket list. I'm going to die. There's no way we can raise this money again. And how are people going to forgive me? This has gone wrong. Right, okay, it was 95% success rate, and I'm in that 5%. What's going on?
Yeah, but you're not the surgeon. It's not your fault.
No,
you are the surgeon, but your mind thinks that way. Yeah.
I felt shame, pure shame. Yeah. And I left it for months, whilst I tried to strengthen my body in other ways. Couldn't access any rehab in England, any neuro rehab, so I had to learn to walk, talk.
So when you came back to the UK and you flew back, how was that for you? Could we be able to walk? How did that function?
No.
So you were wheelchaired?
I did have a wheelchair at the time. I had a wheelchair that allowed me to be flat, and also had like the neck stabilization, like the head holder. We couldn't afford like an air ambulance as such, from England to America. So everything was trying to minimize costs. There was risks if you tell a big airline company that you're going for life-saving surgery.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So we kept things almost on the down low. And then we were on Virgin Airline on the way out there, and I went in business class that I could lie flat. And one of the air hostesses recognised me.
All right.
Made the biggest, loveliest fuss, took such care of me and the children. The children got to meet the pilot, and they were made to feel very special. And they made what was a very difficult, traumatic journey there and back palatable. Memories that we can look back and smile
super on. For Virgin. Yeah. That's super for Virgin.
Yeah. Absolutely. Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
On the way home, they made a bigger fuss. Like they went above and beyond for us, and they were just amazing. So I got to lie flat.
Yeah.
I was on my own, but I did that.
Yeah. So you're in upper class, and you were able to lie back. Yeah.
Yeah, my family weren't.
Now, this is something I'm going to do right now, which is ultra abnormal for my show. I'm actually going to put this into 3 parts. What I don't want is for people to listen and just skip over stuff because it's long. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm actually going to close down part 2, and I'm going to come back to you for part 3 at a time of your liking. Hopefully, if I could do it by next week, that would be brilliant. But I want to do this because I want to really give this the gravitas that it should be provided with, because I know that your story is only halfway through when you're telling me.
Yeah.
So I don't want to rush any time on. I want you to be able to say, what really happened thereafter. So just so you can just orientate yourself back home now. So you're back in the UK, Virgin have put you through, you've got back in the UK, and you realise, frankly, I'm dying and I've got to do something about it. So just line me up for the next episode. Okay.
So there was that case of burying my head in the sand and trying to figure out if there were other routes. There was over the following months, a lot more became clear. I tried to seek a lot of help over here, and that backlashed because I'd been to America. And by about 8 months later, I needed a lot more surgery, and I needed to go and find a different doctor.
Because this guy had been no good for you, had he, in the States? Let's be truthful. He'd not done
well. I have to, I guess, allow people to have their own opinion on that.
No, not that he hadn't done the operation, right? That's not what I'm going to say, but it's just the system therein
didn't work for me.
Doesn't work, does it? That's
and the method used wasn't working with my body, and I didn't feel heard. Yeah. He wasn't at that point responding back to my attempts to communicate, to make the next steps in my care. And so I had to try to find somebody else, somewhere else, and figure out the costs, which...
And at a lower cost than the United States.
Oh, but they were more than treble what we could have even been prepared for. Yeah.
So
there's a lot more to come.
So I'm going to leave it at that juncture, because otherwise we're going to jump into the next part. So we're going to go into the next part, and if it... Frankly, Sam, if it takes another 2 episodes, I'm going to do it, because I don't want to leave this high-bound. This is an unbelievable event. And I'm trying not to use the word story, because this is what they use on the news. And it trivializes it. It's because it's not a story. This is your life.
Yeah, so, I always say it's my truth. It's
absolutely.
It's a hard one. Story's a tricky word, but I get it.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'd like for you, as I said, as and when, is for you to come back on the show, and we'll go through the next stages as to where we are now, and maybe even future gaze. So this is where I've decided to finish part 2 of the interview of Samantha's fight for life, and I'll come back to you with part 3. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for listening, and I hope that you stay with the story because it's absolutely intriguing. See you again next week.
If you'd like to help Carlton keep producing the Black Spy podcast and receive episodes and information that's only available to Carlton's special Patreon agents, then you can donate as little as £3, €4 or $5 a month by signing up with Patreon. See the Black Spy podcast notes or Google Patreon Black Spy podcast and pledge your monthly amount. You can even win the opportunity to be a guest on the show. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe for free.
Here is a working class spy telling his stories, the secrets, the lives of spies. Feel free to message Carlton King on all socials and give this show 5 stars on Apple iTunes and subscribe so you never miss a single episode. For your ears only.
I was a member of Her Majesty's Secret Intelligence Service.